My name is Mrs. Hauser, and today in the art room we are going to be learning the different tools that you're going to use in order to make your clay project. So some of the tools that you are going to get to use is first and foremost a piece of canvas. So you'll have this on your desk, and the reason why you want to use some canvas is to keep your desk from getting too dirty. If you're at home and working, you can just use a regular old cutting board. That would work just fine. And so you want to have your piece of canvas. Then the next tool that we have is we are going to use a rolling pin if you're going to do the slab technique. So you want to have a rolling pin to work with. You also are going to need what are called slab sticks if you are going to be using the slab technique. So they're just two sticks that are the same width, and I'll show you how to use those once we get to the slab construction method. You are going to need some slip. So again, slip is just basically wet clay. So those of you who took some clay home with you, really what you need to do is just take a little ball of clay and some water, and you want to just kind of get that clay to disintegrate a little bit into that water so you get this nice kind of sandy texture, and that's essentially going to work as the glue for your ceramic project. So you do want to have your slip. You do have a metal rib in your packet, and or you may have a plastic one. It has little ridges on the edge that we can use to score with. You have a sponge which you can use to smooth out different blemishes that are on your clay project, or you can use it to wet down your project if you need to. You have what's called a fettling knife, or at home you could just use a butter knife. That would be fine too. It helps you cut the clay. Then you've got just different modeling tools. So these are all technically modeling tools. They come as wood or plastic, and so you can use any one of these to help you shape your project with the clay. You also have a beveled wire cutter, and so this helps you cut a beveled edge on your project, and so I can show you how to use that as well in a later video. You have what's called a needle tool, so it's just a needle point to help you get fine detail if you need that. Then you've got a tiny loop tool, so you can use that to carve again out different areas or different pieces of your project if you need to do that as well. From there, some added detail work, if you want to do that, you can use little molds to help you create different textures on your pieces. So I just have like an ABC alphabet mold here that I could press my clay into and then pop it back out. I also have just kind of these neat texture tiles. One is wood, one looks like rocks. So I could use those as well. And the other things that you could use just like a flat texture mat. So I have some of these. If you're at home, think about some of the textured items that you could find at home. Maybe it's the bottom of your shoe. Maybe it's some fabrics that you guys wear. Maybe it's a package that you got and you want to use the bubble wrap to create some textures for you. You could also go outside and get a rock, or some of you have pine cones and pine trees out there, so you could take those and press those into the clay. Seashells work as well. Some of you have gone on travels and adventures, so you could take a seashell and press that into your project. Some other tools might be using a paper pattern, or in this case, this is a piece of tag board that I cut to 3.5 by 3.5. So this little piece here, you can use to help you cut a pattern out of your clay, and then, for example, I would use this to make a square. So I would cut out 6 of these little squares and then use it to build a square box. The last thing is going to be an actual wire cutter, and generally if you're going to use this tool, I'm going to be working with you to use it. It just helps us cut the clay just a little bit easier for some of those bigger pieces. Okay? Hi, I'm Mrs. Hauser, and today in the art room I'm going to be showing you how to create the different construction methods that you will be able to use to make your clay project. So one of the first construction methods that we're going to talk about is the slab construction method. So when you do the slab construction method, you are going to need slab sticks, or essentially 2 items that are the same thickness that will keep you from accidentally making uneven thickness with your slab. You will need a rolling pin, and then I have my clay and my canvas here, as well as I have my little paper pattern piece. So when we think about slab construction, that essentially is rolling out a slab of clay. It's that simple. So what I'm doing here is I am just very gently extending my slab of clay by throwing it just gently at an angle to get it to elongate a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2 slab sticks, I'm going to stick it on either side, and my goal is I'm going to make some 3.5 by 3.5 inch squares. So I want to maybe make this a little extra long. So I'm going to kind of tighten this up just a little bit. I'm going to take my rolling pin. When you go to roll out a slab, you always want to start with the rolling pin in the middle of the slab and roll down and roll up. Okay? And you don't have to get it to roll all out at once. So do about 2 or 3 passes. Then what you're going to do is move the slab sticks off. If you need to, you're going to roll the canvas over and you're going to flip the slab so that we can then roll on the back side as well. So now I'm just going to take a minute here and I'm going to keep rolling this out until my rolling pin hits both sticks and no longer expands with the clay. So here we go. Okay, so now my clay slab is completely level with my slab sticks. So I'm going to move them out of the way and I'm going to take my little pattern piece and I'm going to kind of map out how many of these little squares can I get without having to re-roll. And what I'm seeing here is I have and can make about 4 of these onto my slab that I've created. So I'm going to take my fettling knife and I'm going to line up my first square, okay, as close as I can to the edge. And it's important when you're cutting with your fettling knife, you want it to be straight up and down. So I don't want it to be, for example, I don't want it to be angled either direction when I'm cutting. So you want it straight up and down, as close to your pattern piece as you can. If it's not perfect, it's going to be okay because we will get a chance to fix it later. And then I'm going to move it over so I don't have to cut again. I'm just going to keep right in line with that one that I already have, the line cut. And then I'm going to go again, keep it nice straight up and down. Cut your pieces. Okay, so I want to just check my thickness. Looks great all the way around. They all look like the same thickness. And here's the trick. You want to set this off to the side so that when you go to roll out again, because I'm going to need 2 more pieces, put it off to the side where you're not going to damage it. Okay, so I'm just going to set these off to the side right over here, away from my workspace where I'm working, so that I can have more room to re-roll as I need to. Now, for some of you, this is going to happen. I didn't cut it all the way through. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my little pattern piece back again. I'm going to line it up. I'm going to cut one more time. And that way I get a nice clean cut. So if you accidentally have it, you notice I kind of pushed it back there. And what I should just do is just cut it right off so that I have a nice crisp clean corner there. Okay. So again, check the edges. Looks pretty good, nice and even all the way through. Awesome. So I've got 4 of my little slabs cut. It's time to roll out my last 2. So I'm going to mush my clay together, but now what I've just done is I've created a lot of air pockets into my clay. So the process that we need to do now is called wedging. So wedging is when you're going to take your clay and you are going to squish it to compress the air out of your clay. So you can either do it this way, okay, for those of you who maybe need a little more hand strength. Okay, the other way that you can do it is you can do kind of like a cone or like kneading bread. So some of you are familiar with that process. So I'm just like pushing forward and pushing it together. So I'm just going to do this for just a minute here, and I am going to get my last few pieces rolled out and cut. So now that I have my little ball here, I can start doing what's called cubing it. So I'm just bouncing it down into a cube. Again, just trying to get as many of those air bubbles out as I possibly can. Okay, once my air bubble's out, I can start throwing it down a little more forcefully to start getting a flatter slab. And notice I'm going to start throwing now at an angle so that it doesn't just come down at a straight impact. And when it comes down at a straight impact, what happens is the middle is really, really thick and the edges are really, really thin. But if you throw it at an angle, then you'll have a more even slab. So I'm just kind of gently throwing it down. And all right, now it's time. I'm going to go ahead and grab my slab sticks, put it on either side, and roll out my last 2 and cut them. Okay, so for some of you students, you'll find that you maybe run into the issue where you're just barely short with your clay. If that's you, I have a little bit of extra spare clay that you can use for your project. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of extra spare clay. I'm going to add it into my project, and that way I have enough so that I can make my loop. Okay, so there you have it. Here are my 6 slabs that I'm going to use to make my box, and I will show you that in the next video. I'm going to go ahead and get it set up so that we can do a pinch pot next. Okay, so today we are going to be learning how to make a pinch pot. And in order to make a pinch pot, you are going to take your clay, and I would recommend only working with maybe about half of your clay at first, just because pinch pots can be kind of tricky. So I'm going to take only about half of this, and I'm going to do that process of wedging again. So I'm going through and just kind of kneading the dough if that's how you want to think of it. Or again, you're just kind of smashing it together between your hands, so you get that nice good compression. And then now I'm going to start rolling it in my hands to make a nice ball. And you just kind of want to get the basis of a sphere into shape here. Once I have that, I'm going to start pressing my thumb down into the sphere. So I'm going to take my thumb and I'm just going to press straight down. And then I'm going to start very carefully pinching slowly. So you don't want to pinch too fast, otherwise you'll break your walls. And you're just going to start pinching and pulling upward just a little bit. Now if you start to notice that your clay is cracking around the tip here, what you can do is you can either take your finger and smooth it out. If you have wet enough clay, it'll just smooth. But if you don't, you can either take your sponge and a little bit of water, and you can kind of smooth it out as you're working. Or you can just take a little bit of water on your finger and do the same thing. So I'm just going to keep going here, kind of gently pulling and pushing that out until I get a nice shape. Once you start to notice, you should have some even thickness right around your edges and your walls. What you want to do is you want to tap it on your table here, and that'll make it nice and even on the top. So you'll notice that I have a little bit more to do on this edge, because this is definitely way too thick for a pinch pot wall. So I'm just going to start going again. Notice I switch directions when I'm rotating. Sometimes that helps get some of those unevenness areas adjusted. And you're just kind of feeling it. Okay, you can switch thumbs if you get tired. Start pulling out those walls. Okay, again, I can tap it on the table here just a little bit. I can take my damp sponge and I can gently fix any cracks that I might have. And there you have a very, very simple pinch pot. Now, for some of you, you want to make like dragon eggs, or you want to make a sphere or a baseball or something like that. So what you're going to need to do is you're just going to need to make another pinch pot, which is what I'm going to do right now. Okay, so I now have my 2 pinch pots, and what I want to do with these 2 pinch pots is I kind of want to start making sure that they're about the same width when I go to join them. So when you join clay, the way that you join clay is you're going to use the technique, okay, that is score, slip, stick, smooth. And when you score, slip, stick, smooth, scoring is essentially just the process of roughing up the surface. So you could use like a toothbrush, you could use like a hair comb, you can use anything that's kind of got some sharp edges to it. You could take a fork at home, that would work. And you're just going to rough up anywhere that you are going to attach your clay pieces together. So when I go to attach this together, I'm going to score both sides. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm making a zipper for my project. And when I go to put the pieces together, that little zipper will interlock and hold the clay together. But in order to actually make that zipper work, we need to add a little bit of what is called slip. And again, slip is just that wet sand. And I'm going to just apply some of that wet slip to my zipper. You don't want to necessarily push down all of your zipper marks, but you do want to make it wet enough so that it sticks together. And now I can go ahead and carefully push my piece together so I get a nice zipper lock on my project. And then you can either start using your thumb to push the project together, or you can use a tool. So I'm going to just grab a quick tool here. And again, you can use the tool to help push your clay together. So I'm just kind of mushing my sides together here. Okay, you could technically use your rib as well. That metal rib, you could use the flat side of it, and you could just pull them to either side. Now it's going to get a little messy here in this mushing it together, so just hold tight if it's not quite the shape that you want it. I'm just mushing that together, just gently forming that clay so that it's one nice solid piece. Now what I can do is I can roll it around to make it into the shape that I want it to be. So for example, if I want it to be a little more egg shape, I can start pulling this top pinch pot into an egg shape a little bit more, or rolling it on the table to get it into more of that egg shape. But I really want to make sure that this piece, when I'm rolling it around, right where that seam is, that it's a good, nice seam so that it doesn't have any gaps or cracking. Okay, so now that I have that and it's together how I want it, I could decorate it right now. So if I'm making this like into a dragon egg, I could take, you know, a needle tool, or I could take my modeling tool, and I could really take the time to kind of carve in some of those egg-like details. Okay. And this is where, you know, you would take your time with this. You would kind of figure out how you want it to look. Okay, some of those extra little pieces in there and the cracking. Okay, but we can't necessarily leave it like this. We can't fire it this way, because if we did, it would essentially explode in the kiln. So our next step that we need to do is we actually need to cut it off. A couple ways that you can do this. You can use a wire cutter and try and cut it that way. I wouldn't recommend it. You could use your fettling knife if it's really, really sharp. Those of you at home, you could take a kitchen knife and do this. But if I cut it straight off, okay, then when I go to actually put my project back together, the lid is just going to fall right off. So you want to add some curve to your lid piece. So when I go to do that, I'm going to kind of map out, and if I want this to be a dragon egg, and again, I'm just kind of carving in a zigzag pattern. Nothing too sharp or too crazy, and I want it to end on the same note. Notice I didn't carve all the way through. It takes a couple carvings to actually get it to carve off and detach. So now I can start going through a second time and trying to get way down in there so that I can cut off my lid for my project. Okay, then you're going to have all these little tiny shards in here. The goal is not to touch your edge too much, because if you start touching it too much, then your egg isn't going to go back together. But you do want to smooth out some of those rough patches just a little bit. So you can either run your finger over it, or again, just very gently use your sponge, okay, and just soften any of those sharp edges. Okay, once you have your edges all smoothed out, it's important to make sure that you can put your project back together and then it sits just exactly how you want it to look when you go to fire it. Okay, So now that I have my lid, this is how I would leave it to dry. The last thing that I need to do is put my name and initials on this so that I know that this is my project. So I'm just on the inside here, I'm going to write my initials so that I can read them. And then I'm also going to put a class hour. So for example, if I was in first hour, I would put a 1 so that I know that this is a first hour student project. Okay? Then on the bottom, it's the same thing. You can either, if you're doing a project like this, you can either put it on the inside here, or you can put it on the very bottom. And again, make sure it's deep enough so that I can read it. Okay. So I've got AH1. I'm going to get all those little goobers off so that they are not there. And I've got my initials. I'm going to put my project back together. And if I'm ready to, I can leave it out to dry so that I can fire it for you. So there we go. There is one project done. Now obviously this is missing a lot of its details to it, so make sure you take the time to embellish a project if this is your idea that you want to do there. So that's how you make a lid, that's how you do 2 pinch pots, and you can make different containers with that. Our last method that we're going to be looking at is how to roll out a coil. Hi, my name is Mrs. Hauser, and today I'm going to be showing you how to roll out a coil using clay. So for those of you that are in my class and those that I sent some clay home with, many of you have just a clay slab right now. You could technically just go right here, and as long as it's nice and flat still, you could just cut your little strips and you will just want them to be the same size. Okay, so for those of you at home, if you don't have something like this, you could just watch the how to roll out a slab method and use that video to roll out a slab and then do this process of cutting it out. So for that, now that I have my little cuts and they're all about the same size, I can then start twisting them just a little bit. And this is the only method that we have these really nice tabletops that are nice and smooth. I would recommend you actually roll out your slabs on the tabletop. So yes, they are going to get a little messy. But you're just going to take it off to the side here, and you can either use one hand to roll this out. So I'm just going between my top of my palm and the bottom of my palm, and I am just very carefully, gently pressing down and rolling out in either direction. Now the reason why I twisted it at the beginning is that'll help you keep the coil from doing the little floppy pancake thing. So if you happen to get some pancakiness, you're just going to twist it again into kind of a drill bit, and then you can start rolling it again, and that'll kind of help even it back out. So if you're having trouble making coils, that's my tip for you. You can use 2 hands, but generally I tell students not to because we end up moving our hands at different speeds and then you get different shaped coils. So I have a little bit of pancakiness here right in the middle, so I'm going to try and even that out. And you don't want your coils to get too thin, you don't want them to be too thick, so this is a pretty good coil shape right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep making my coils based on that. So I'm going to twist it first, and then I'm going to start rolling it out. Okay, so now I have 2 coils that I can work with. I would go ahead and finish making all of your coils before you go ahead. Unless it's going to take you a long time to do your coils, then I would recommend getting these wrapped up so that they don't get hard. You don't want your coil clay to get hard because when you go to start actually coiling it, if they're too hard or too dry, then they will crack. So I'm going to get started on showing you how to attach these together. So if I want to just make maybe the bottom of a coil pot, I need to again score anywhere where clay is attaching to clay. So I generally tell students just kind of score right along the entire coil in different directions so you get a nice zipper effect. Then we're going to use slip because that's our second step of joining clay together. We're going to go all the way down our coil. Okay. And now I'm going to lay this on its side and I'm going to start doing a coil just as we imagine, just kind of this rounded coil all the way through until I get a nice wrap. And for some of you, maybe this is what you want the base of your project to be. Okay, or you just want to make a bunch of these and then attach each of the coils together in different sizes to make your project. Very acceptable to do that. For those of you that want to build up, kind of you're just going to take and you are going to score your coil. You're going to score where you're going to attach to. So I'm going to attach to this base here all along the outside. I'm going to take some slip. I'm going to run it on my scratch marks here, or my score marks. And then this is where you can do a little bit of eyeball measuring. So I'm just going to look and kind of measure and wrap it around here, getting my zipper to attach to my zipper. And then here's what I like to do. I like to take my fettling knife and cut at an angle so that my two clay pieces here can actually go together at an angle and I don't get that awkward bump in my coils. So now I can just attach it like so. If you're noticing that it's breaking quite a bit, like my clay is pretty wet, so we're good to go here. But if it's dry, you want to score and slip and attach that coil together right here at this joining piece. So now I'm just gently going to press down, make sure that it's nice and together. And I would just continue to do that to make my coil pot into whatever height I want it to be. Okay, so you can see kind of that nice even thickness all the way through. Okay, so that's how you can use the coil technique to work with your project. Okay, art students, so now we get to talk about how to clean up our mess after we've made a big clay mess on our table. And it's okay to make a mess in the art room, absolutely. That's how we learn. Sometimes that's how we learn best. But when we go to clean up for our clay, it's really, really important that we make sure that our slip buckets get sealed 100% and that there's no air getting into that bucket there. And then you can put that off to the side. Then I'm going to take my tools, and you have a disinfectant bucket at your table. And you're going to take, and I like to use my sponge, you're going to get all of the clay off of the tools so that they don't rust and so that they don't get clogged up. So that one is clean. I'm going to put it off to the side here. Then I'm going to take my metal scraper. Again, be careful with this one. You don't want to cut yourself on accident. So just be careful with this as you're cleaning it. Make sure it's 100% clean. Notice there's no clay on it. Put it off to the side. Same thing with your fettling knife. Be very, very careful with this. Obviously, you are scraping a knife and cleaning a knife. So do your very best. Make sure you get the handle as well. Getting it totally clean. Same thing with the needle tool. Make sure you don't drop and lose it in there. Hey, we don't want to lose these nice little teeny tiny tools. They work really well for detail. And then once you get those all clean, I'm going to dismiss you so that you can walk over. Make sure your sponge is clean. So that you can walk over with all these teeny tiny baby scraps on our canvas mat. We're going to just walk over to the garbage can. You're going to put it in the garbage can and just gently shake. We don't want to have all that dust going up into the air. And then it's time to set up your desk, just like the photo that you'll see at the end of this video. That's how I want you to set up your desk so it's nice and clean, ready to go for the next student in class. I will come around and spray your desks, and you'll get a paper towel. And again, you're just going to wipe it down, and we're going to wipe it down really, really good so there's no clay dust left for people to breathe in, especially right now with what we have going on in the world. We want to make sure that we keep it really, really clean. Okay? Bonus for cleaning. If you used a rolling pin, it is important that you actually clean the clay off of the rolling pin, because if you leave it on there, what's going to happen is the next time that someone rolls a slab, they're going to have that clay bump into their slab every time. So yes, you are going to use your bucket and you are going to use your sponge, and as carefully as you possibly can, please don't use a knife. If you use a knife on your rolling pin, then you're going to create grooves and scratches, and then that's even worse than the clay chunks. So you're just very carefully going to wash all that clay off. You'll have some extra paper towels at your desk, and you're just going to wipe it off and put it back into the bin. So get all the clay off the handle as well. You don't want that extra clay on the handle. For those of you using rolling pins at home, make sure you do a really good job cleaning this as well, because obviously you don't want clay getting into your food. And you can also use PVC pipe at home if you don't have a rolling pin at home. PVC pipe works really, really well. So get it totally clean. And as I mentioned, you'll have a paper towel at your desk. You will wipe it off so it's nice and dry. And you can set it off to the side. Most of the time the slab sticks are just fine, they'll be okay, but if you notice your slab stick is full of clay, please take a moment to also clean it the same way that you cleaned your rolling pin. And that's how we're going to clean up for our clay unit this week. You're going to put it in the garbage can and just gently shake. We don't want to have all that dust going up into the air. And then it's time to set up your desk, just like the photo that you'll see at the end of this video. That's how I want you to set up your desk so it's nice and clean, ready to go for the next student in class. I will come around and spray your desks, and you'll get a paper towel. And again, you're just going to wipe it down, and we're going to wipe it down really, really good so there's no clay dust left for people to breathe in, especially right now with what we have going on in the world. We want to make sure that we keep it really, really clean. Bonus for cleaning. If you used a rolling pin, it is important that you actually clean the clay off of the rolling pin, because if you leave it on there, what's going to happen is the next time that someone rolls a slab, they're going to have that clay bump into their slab every time. So yes, you are going to use your bucket and you are going to use your sponge, and as carefully as you possibly can. Please don't use a knife. If you use a knife on your rolling pin, then you're going to create grooves and scratches, and then that's even worse than the clay chunks. So you're just very carefully going to wash all that clay off. You'll have some extra paper towels at your desk, and you're just going to wipe it off and put it back into the bin. So get all the clay off the handle as well. You don't want that extra clay on the handle. For those of you using rolling pins at home, make sure you do a really good job cleaning this as well, because obviously you don't want clay getting into your food. And you can also use PVC pipe at home if you don't have a rolling pin at home. PVC pipe works really, really well. So get it totally clean. And as I mentioned, you'll have a paper towel at your desk. You will wipe it off so it's nice and dry. And you can set it off to the side. Most of the time the slab sticks are just fine, they'll be okay, but if you notice your slab stick is full of clay, please take a moment to also clean it the same way that you cleaned your rolling pin. And that's how we're going to clean up for our clay unit this week.